Oh my gosh. And it's a lot of fun. And so is this. I love talking to people, especially those in the industry, like media, podcasting, who, know familiar with the behind the scenes kind of thing. And uh well, why don't we start with that? Like it wasn't you didn't like leave high school thinking you would be. I mean, was it podcasting even a thing? Was where you were like, I'm going to be a brand expert. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to brand stuff and people. So how did you get into the podcasting world, into um, helping entrepreneurs, other people build their brands?
Yeah, you're right. It wasn't an idea that I thought of or imagined in high school. In high school, honestly, Aaron, I was a horny little kid, right? And I loved models, supermodels. I would have them hanging on my walls. Cindy Crawford. I'm going to date myself. Stephanie Seymour. I forgot what they called them. The Fab Five, whatever they had. They had some name for these supermodels. Naomi Campbell, all these ladies. And I had the ability to draw, like comic books. And I would sketch these models and hang them all over my wall. And I was just a, you know, typical teenager getting into trouble. And one day my dad realized, hey, this kid's a junior in high school. I'm going to pull him by the ear and bring him over to an art school. So he drove me up to Sullivan County College in New York, Sullivan County, all the way upstate. And I saw that being in the world of art was actually a way to make a living. I couldn't even imagine that this was a real thing. There were drafting tables, there were cameras, there were artists walking around with, portfolios, pencils, all the things. So I was in, and that's basically what started my whole career. I got into, what I thought I would get into was illustration, and then I found out that I was nowhere near as good as all the kids who were drawing, already working for Marvel, working for DC comic books, all of these things. These were kids sitting next to me at the other drafting table, and I was like, I can't compete with these guys. Let me let me come up with something else, and that was graphic design. That was designing logos, getting really intimate with typography, and that started to develop eventually into logos and branding in my career. So that's where it all started, Aaron.
That's cool. In fact, I'm looking for a new logo myself. But that's interesting that how you describe that, because my family, artists, and my mom's side of the family, sketch artists, painters, all of that. I had the creative spark, but it was in the kitchen, and I thought early on that I wanted to become a chef, and realized that uh, I was okay. It was okay. I was an okay cook, but it was also one of those things where I love to cook, and I joined the Navy as a cook, and worked my way up to become admiral's chef. But I love cooking. I love being a sailor. I hated cooking in the Navy, but one of those things where I realized that it wasn't the career path for me. So
But you did it for a while too. How long did it take for you to realize you didn't like wanted to do it forever? You did it. You made your way up that ladder. It took how long did it take you?
well, that's how they get you. Yeah, whether it's the civilian world or the military world, every once in a while they throw you a bone with a little promotion, a little more responsibility, a little more leadership, right? Yeah, and just a tiny bit more money, and you keep climbing that ladder. You're like, all right, I'll start that creative path. I'll find my own way next year or whatever someday. But you did spend some time in the corporate world,
Oh yeah,
and you
21
learned
years.
a thing or two about a thing or two. But when did you make that transition?
The transition into corporate or leaving corporate?
Leaving corporate, doing your own thing, becoming an entrepreneur.
It was, yeah, over 2 decades of living a life of drinking, smoking, hanging out with my friends, and as some people may be able to imagine, based off televisions and movies, the art world, the creative world, agencies, New York, all those things. It's true. It's not really an exaggeration. There's a lot of competition, and not much of it is unhealthy competition. And then there's also the idea that there's just beautiful young people, everybody, and there's a lot of alcohol involved. Where, so I just got to the point where I was growing tired of that. I was married. We had our first baby. I was still living in that type of world. I didn't like all the temptation around me. And the second was on the way, and that's when I realized the road was starting to fork, and I was either going to continue on this path and actually gaining more notoriety and gaining more responsibility. Not necessarily much more in terms of paycheck. It was gradually going up. I was realizing I was hitting a ceiling for sure. Like this is the most I was going to make as a creative director in corporate world. And that's when I started to read and recognize you have to be a partner or in the firm or the company, or you need to own the business. So that's when I was like, oh, let me start exploring this. And an opportunity to lead a team in New York City and in Chicago. That was a dream of mine to lead a team and grow a team in terms of creative agencies. And I saw my whole life flash before me, Aaron. Like I was getting fatter. I was getting more and more miserable. I was probably eventually going to cheat on my wife. There was all these things that were just, it was, I could see it. It was not a pretty future. So I decided to not take that opportunity. And I took that opportunity to figure out what I wanted to do. And while I was figuring out what I wanted to do, a purple book landed in my lap that you are aware of, by Robert Kiyosaki, called Rich Dad Poor Dad. And that just changed my whole life. And I was like, I'm going to become a real estate investor, which my wife was like, what are you talking about? Where's this come from? You don't know anything about real estate. I was like, I'll figure it out. And I did. Bought my first multifamily building in less than a year of leaving corporate. So yeah, we were really blessed to be able to do all that.
When did GoBundance come into play? Because I know you've talked about that before.
Yeah, so it's all a blur, but I would say they were a huge influence on where I went, because after reading the book, I needed to educate myself on how to do it. The book inspires you the why, like this is why you need to do it, but nowhere does it tell you the
Yeah,
actionable
that
steps.
Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's literally there's almost no real estate in there at all, but it's like the number one real estate book ever.
Yeah, exactly. And then eventually he got involved with courses and stuff by selling the name off to people, and I bought into those programs. Oh my gosh, spent tens of thousands of dollars on that. But Bigger Pockets was the cheaper avenue to get my education. I did both, and during that process, I just networking, making friends with people, finding local people led me to Bigger Pockets, like Josh Dorkin, Brandon Turner, all those guys, who were the hosts of the show at the time, and we became friends through GoBundance. That was my avenue and way to get closer to them, which was really cool, because then eventually my company started working with Bigger Pockets to produce shows. Started working with a lot of the folks there, like Jay Scott. They all became friends. So yeah, it was just working my way, making connections. You realize all these people who are your heroes are just people, and they're approachable. And if you have value to add in their life, then yeah, it could become a reality. Something I would never have thought of, the year or two prior to being in corporate. like that I would be sidling up to the guys who inspire me. You know, Kiyosaki got on our show too at some point. So yeah, as long as you keep pushing and realizing there's really no limits, you know all that. you live that. It's pretty amazing, you know, what you could do.